Thank you, Benito, Professor Radhanam. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be back at INSEAD after a very short period of time. I was here just a few months ago, and though it's a bit intimidating to be in the presence of so many leaders from the corporate sector to speak about a subject in which you probably do more than I do. But this is really a relevant topic for our times. Every generation in human history lives with the conceit that it is going through the world's most profound changes. But this is really an era which we can cope off in terms of a change or a process of transformation and transitions that rarely happen in human history. We've seen global shifts of power, we've seen the character of the global economy change, we've seen international relations under a global change, daily disruptions of technology. And almost always, as it has often happened in history, it is the technology which is in some sense at the root of all the changes that we are seeing, political, social, economic around the world. And really the most visible change of our time is the dawn of the digital era. And I think it bears repeating that it has changed everything around us. And those of us who are from the transition generation will perhaps understand this more than millennials who grow up with all the technology around them. It has changed the way we live, consume, work, communicate, even entertain ourselves. It has redefined politics, economy, and society. It is raising new questions about ethics, law, governance, data, and security. It is, as I said, changing equations between nations, character of international relations, and also projection of power by countries. But what it has done, perhaps more than anything else, is unleash opportunities and possibilities that was unimaginable just a few decades ago. It has opened new possibilities of transforming lives, of mainstreaming the marginalized, of empowering the weak, of reforming and transforming governance, equipping the youth, unleashing enterprise, making society and governance more citizen-centric, putting banking, insurance, and pensions within the reach of all, making vast improvements in health and education, bringing cities and villages together, remote areas closer to the mainstreams of national economies. And these changes are perhaps more profound in emerging markets or developing economies than in the developed economies. And the reasons are obvious. One, that developing economies are characterized by governance gaps, weak institutions, a poor infrastructure, unequal access to just about every kind of opportunity and resources, class unfulfilled needs, constraints of capacity, and vast leakages in the system. So these characteristics lend themselves to much better application with much higher rates of return on application of digital technology. But it is also the scale and speed with which you can implement projects and have resources that are far less than would be required in the case of what was then physical infrastructure. It is also the mobilizational and motivational possibilities, the mobilizational and motivational possibilities that digital technology and social media enables governments to do in order to change behavior in a manner that supports development objectives. There are, of course, the downsides to it as well. But that has had an enormous role in India's development strategy over the past 5 years. There is also the possibility of moving from asset ownership to use-based satisfaction of demands or needs, which in resource-constrained economies, which emerging markets and developing economies are, is a huge advantage. but it is also the ability and the imagination to apply new technologies like artificial intelligence and blockchain to sometimes intractable problems, for example, of land records, of health, education. These are the possibilities that are making it now real for developing and emerging economies to address what seemed like problems that could never be solved, or could be solved over long periods of time, and certainly not in one generation. So when we look at the entire range of possibilities for emerging markets, you see the development possibilities. Today, you can connect farmers to markets. You can do soil health analysis in very, very micro details using sensors and digital technology. You can actually do irrigation on the basis of data analytics, of combining soil health data, moisture content, with the release of water for irrigation, and imagine the possibilities it has in a water-starved or a water-stressed environment, and what it does in terms of efficiency of use of water. So there is a development paradigm. There is the financial inclusion, about which I will speak at some length. Environmental sustainability, employment generation. And when I say this is when you look at countries like India, and you compare the 1980s to 2019, the entire character of employment in the country has changed. The most graphic would be that if you look at a village where there would be two young fellows repairing tires of a cycle or a motorcycle, they are now repairing cell phones, or providing recharging facilities, or internet access. There is a completely new paradigm of employment opportunities, but the challenges is something which I will go through in a minute. And in terms of enterprise, unleashing the enterprise in an economy, we are today buoyed by the prospects, whether it is in India or in Africa or in Latin America or in Southeast Asia, about what the ability to create an enterprise out of a laptop, and some seed funding into in terms of generating employment. And when we speak of employment, we have to completely reimagine what employment really means. Because some of our definitions, especially in emerging markets, still speak of employment in terms of very fixed formal sector definitions. If you must have worked for so many hours in a place of employment that employs so many people and has a turnover of this range and meets certain labor employment criteria. In a gig economy, in a startup-driven economy, these are employment definitions that no longer hold. So in the emerging markets, the entire gamut in terms of enterprise, employment, environment sustainability, financial inclusion, and development, there are a whole range of opportunities. And as we often do in business schools, we will talk of some case studies, particularly with reference to the country that I just speak of. But for whatever we have seen, whether it is the M-Pesa in Kenya, or whether it is the OVO e-wallet in Indonesia, or whether it is the health tool like Moser in Egypt, or whether it is the these are the kinds of exciting news stories that you hear that gives us all a great sense of optimism. But there are challenges, and there are challenges in emerging markets, which we should I'd like to list some of them. One, of course, is, the first one is naturally your national capacity. And national capacity is a sum of so many factors, but it is also essentially driven by the fact whether you already have an ecosystem in the economy where the capacity to translate some of the success stories in the private sector to the broader governance model is possible. So it is very difficult suddenly, and I've had this experience of doing this in some of the African countries, is to translate the idea like Aadhaar of India into a country. Because there does not exist as yet the national capacity to absorb and scale up a project of that kind. The second, of course, and related to this, is the human resources area. And yet, and even now, although the spread of digital literacy is growing, and capacities, innovation capacities are growing, there is still a huge gap in human resources in a large number of emerging markets and developing economies. In some sense, India was a bit of an exception. There are other countries like the Philippines, which are also in the same path. And the third, of course, relates to infrastructure. That is obvious to say, the digital infrastructure, the access to cell phones, the access to other kinds of digital devices, the telecommunication network. But there is something else also that matters, and which is the access to technology and software. And in emerging markets and in developing economies, the ability to access open source software will be a critical factor in the ability of countries and governments to spread the use of transformative digital technologies and stimulate innovation. And this is a challenge that the world is grappling with, but I think the greater access of open source software has made it possible now for people to dream of big things. The other aspect, of course, relates to consumers. And in terms of consumers, digital literacy is, of course, a very important factor. The willingness to adopt new methods, because it isn't just a question of adopting technology, it is also a question of fundamental change in behavior. Do you move from a cash, how do you convince people to move from cash to use of a contactless device and feel comfortable that the money I've transferred to my village is actually reached there and safe? So adoption is, and that leads to the issue of trust. You're dealing with a system which is actually invisible to you. You only have a device in your hand, which you must trust for what it says about you. And that trust takes a long time to build. In some cases, the adaptability can be high. And that trust also means price sensitivity. The price sensitivity in every product, physical product or digital products, is much higher in developing economies than it is in developed economies, and that's a challenge for enterprises when they move from mature markets to developing markets. Which is why today, when Jio in India offers an unlimited data package at 299 rupees, which is like $5, 6 Singapore dollars, people have just taken to the use of digital technology in a big way. But the government has a big role to play, and the first important thing is policies, regulation, laws. That's the one set of variables. The second set of variables relates to incentives. And incentives are tax related, it is related to cost of transaction, it is related to duties that you impose on technology-related products that are imported into the country, and sometimes the executive fiat. For example, we banned transaction in cash over a certain limit. And when we have this brutal measure of demonetization, whatever you might say about it, it brought about a very perceptible change in behavior that would have been impossible. So the government also has an important role to play in spreading the use of digital technology. Then comes the important area of risk and resilience of the system. Imagine if you had introduced a financial inclusion package where people are suddenly excited about banking and they find that there has been a cyber attack on the bank and all that money is gone. That's the end, really, of your efforts to bring about financial inclusion. Risk and resilience is something which, of course, enterprises and the governments have to work together to build and to create. So the government, the important roles, as I said, policies, regulations, law. It's also about incentives, it's about decisions, it's about creating risk, resilience in the economy, and of course, making sure that digital infrastructure spreads. And finally, it is of the role of enterprises. In enterprise, what is your objective? In emerging markets, it's not about cutting edge innovation. It is not about competition at the cutting edge of Industry 4.0. It is really about identifying unfulfilled market needs, societal needs, and working and aligning your objectives with the government to ensure that there is an expansion of the market for digitalization. And enterprises can actually create solutions that improves user experiences, that improves or increases trust and confidence of the consumer. And we see this wonderful partnership in India and other emerging markets a great deal. And also what the governments then do for the startups. In India, we've of course got a startup India. Now, you can have two models. You can either have the seemingly anarchic model of the United States, where the ecosystem is a self-generating, self-propelling one, or in emerging markets, you create an ecosystem in which you are creating incubators and accelerators, in which you are creating funds, as we do in India, for seeding the startups. So this is going to play a very important role, and I've seen big corporates in India and elsewhere recognize the advantage of taking on that responsibility themselves. And they are almost go to every startup event and look for young, bright ideas, young minds and bright ideas, and start seeing them, incorporate them into their businesses. So the approach of enterprises in developing economies will have to be fundamental. And finally, the last challenge, and this is an emerging challenge we all have to grapple with, is the new emerging issues around data. Because so far, internet has been a boundaryless entity. But today there is greater call, as data is becoming a resource, there is greater call for data sovereignty. And when we speak of data sovereignty, in addition to data privacy, data localization, data protection, you entering a completely new world which will challenge the enterprises, particularly multinational companies that work across countries using the seemingly free flow of data. We have been a great beneficiary of that flow of data because it has created the world's biggest, in some sense, the BPO industry and outsourcing and the back office processing. But we ourselves may create that kind of a challenge. But this is uncharted territory. I don't think policymakers anywhere around the world fully understand the implications of now suddenly speaking in terms of fragmenting the technology market, whether it is in terms of hardware or whether in terms of data flows. And this is a question that enterprises will have to discuss with the governments because they are the real stakeholders in this process. So having outlined the opportunities and challenges, I'll just very briefly touch upon our case study because I'd love to speak about the India story, which is quite remarkable. First, of course, is the biometrics. In the course of 4 years, we were able to create a biometric identity of 1.2 billion people, which at a cost of $1 per person, which means the cost of acquisition, storage, processing, and issuing an identity document, which is, if you can print out an Aadhaar step, which Aadhaar is the means in Indian foundation, and really is the foundation of the new digital transformation. Then the next thing is that using Aadhaar or biometrics, we have opened 350 million new bank accounts in the course of 4 years. I remember I was in the Prime Minister's office in the course of the last 4 years before I came here. And when Prime Minister Modi, when he came to office in 2014, he says he wants universal banking and he wants to launch this Jan Dhan Yojana, the banking scheme. So he asked the civil servants how long will it take to launch it. They said 3 years. He says, I'm going to launch it in September, some date he gave. And it was just 2 months away. And we had to work backwards from it. And in the course of 4 years, you've got 340 million, 350 million bank accounts. Bank accounts are not just bank accounts, they're a source of dignity, identity, and even more of opportunities. So these 350 million bank accounts are now linked to welfare schemes. So you have $50 billion of direct benefits transferred to these accounts by the government. Millions of them have been linked to pension and affordable insurance schemes. So today, an economy that has 1 billion plus cell phones, a billion plus biometric identity and a billion bank accounts is really poised to do anything that imagination and inspiration enables us to do. And this is probably the biggest digital public infrastructure in the world today. And linked to that, see the advantages that it has created. We have today launched a universal healthcare scheme for 500 million people. It is only possible because we have been able to link these accounts to the health and welfare schemes. We have issued 145 million micro loans without security collateral. 145 million loans or mudra loans amounting to $90 billion for the poor and the marginalized. 75% of whom are women. And this is the power of technology to reduce gender gaps also. Because these benefits flow directly not into the husband's account but into the accounts of women. Whether even in terms of the fact that in the last 5 years we have been able to deliver 80 million cooking gas connections to women. And the subsidies go into their accounts, not into the accounts of the other family members. This is the kind of change that has been possible. We have 250,000 village councils. 120,000 have already been connected by fiber optic network of 300,000 kilometers. By the end of 2 years, we will have another 200, remaining to 120,000 connected. 300,000 common service centers have been set up in India to provide 11 services on the digital platform to villages across the country. 11 services. And guess who handles these? I was going to say who mans these common service centers, but is handled by women. It's been a conscious effort of the government to make sure that women are the ones who are handling the common service centers. But you think of what we've done in terms of payment. We've got maybe the world's most sophisticated unified payment interface, which is seamless, connects 128 banks. It has 85 applications, 36 developed by Indian fintech firms. And see how the government addressed the payment challenges. One, if you have a smartphone and internet connection, you use the UPI for bank-to-bank transfer. But if you have a dumb phone, or if you have a phone and you do not have an internet connection, you still have the USSD system in 12 languages to make digital payments. And if you are poor and you do not have a phone or obviously an internet connection, you can still make digital payments using biometrics and 400,000 micro ATMs, or what is called the Aadhaar-enabled payment system across the country. And we have registered 21 billion transactions on that system. So a policy that is able to take care of unequal access. So if you simply go and say, look, if you're a smartphone, you're fine. But where is the solution and innovation? And finding a solution for those who do not have either the phone or the internet connection. Similarly, we have now 60 million small and medium enterprises. We brought them on thanks to the GST, which is now across the country. All of them are coming onto the digital network. So what is this other advantage of that? The other advantage is that today, using algorithm of their GST returns, income tax returns, and bank statements, we are able to give them loans of up to $150,000 in 59 minutes. So less than the time it takes to commute in Delhi traffic. It is again the link between GST, digitalization of small and medium enterprises, 60 million of them, and then linking it using algorithms to their bank statements, to their IT returns, and see what should have. 150,000 is a big sum of money for a small enterprise in India. We have created a government e-marketplace, as some of you might be aware, where there are 4.4 million sellers, 30,000 buyers, and 600,000 products listed. And it does everything to generate contracts, to evaluation, to and execution. And then we of course have the startup, where we today have 8,000 startups in just the last 4 or 5 years. 8 unicorns in 2018, and that wouldn't have been possible without the support system that policymakers are providing for that. But it's very interesting to see how space technology is being used for development. Today, we use space imaging for fishermen to know exactly where the fishing catch is. They save time and they save fuel costs. We're also using space technology to generate new watersheds, which have dried up, to enable fishing for people in rural areas. I mean, I can tell you there are 170 development applications being identified, 170, when we were working on space technology for development in rural areas. And that's still remarkable, including infrastructure management. And similarly, you look at what enterprise can do. In rural areas today, people start a small retail with just a phone and no inventory. A fellow comes, young fellow comes, he looks, he says, I saw this on my social media, a new Adidas shoes or a new cell phone. And he tells the shopkeeper, I want that. That has opened an entirely new distribution network. Samsung is being able to sell 32-inch color TVs by thousands in rural areas because it identified the need. Because people were going to these rural retailers who just needed a small space and kept a bit of inventory just for trial and to look like a shop. And they were simple. But it required also what I had not mentioned before, a physical infrastructure that is able to deliver the logistics. So that's the other side of it. So in all areas, you can see how it opens new possibilities. For us, therefore, what has been the reason for success? Number one is, I can tell you, the government, starting with the previous government, and I was part of the initial discussion of debates. I was there in the PMO then also when we started this whole debate in India. Not many of you know that there was a National Citizens Register which Ministry of Home was running. Again on the same model. But it was so slow that those who conceived and created the architecture for Aadhaar just swamped them out. Because you didn't want to complete the system. And that is, so right from the beginning, the government was very aware that it isn't just about enterprises, it isn't just about creating markets, it is how do you harness the power of digital technology to change development paradigm. That has been the biggest objective. But in doing that, we've created new markets for enterprises as well, and created new opportunities for our people. It is also the presence of visionary leaders, because we had companies that had scaled up to global levels, INSEAD, Tata Consultancy, Wipro, and others, and they had the capacity to imagine and create a project of this scale. Nandan was able to do this. So how do you create a system that is able to capture data from the remotest areas for 1.2 billion people and do deduplication and maintain data security in the course of 4 years? Deduplication can take 30 seconds today. And we were able to capture data even from remote areas. And it has a 2048-bit encryption that will take you forever to even crack. But yet, imagine this was done when we didn't have the kind of fiber optic networks that we have. So it is also that presence that helped us. Third, as I have already said, particularly since the last 4 years, Prime Minister and the government have been very keen to ensure that every area of development and every ministry looks at ways in which IT can transform its working and achieve the objectives it is pursuing. And if you see our successive budgets, you will see an enormous set of incentives that have been given for adoption and for making access easier. And finally, it has to do with the human resources and the enormous scale on which we are pursuing the digital literacy program. It is not just the IIT and the big IT alumni that we are talking about. You know, when we were doing the data capture for Aadhaar, the certification course was just 2 weeks, but it was designed in a way that a person could go to a remote area and simply, and it was not a high-paying job, so it didn't take someone from a great college to do it. It was just people in local areas that were able to So it's a question of policy, expansion of infrastructure, as I just said, broadband across the country. It is the incentives that we create. It is the way we harness the enterprises, the startup regimes that we thought about, and ultimately investment in the human resources that has enabled us to really ride on the digital transformation that we are experiencing today in India. Thank you very much.
Hello. Your Excellency, my name is Bilal Paul. I am the critical care business for Philips Initiatives of Africa in India. Highly inspired with the talk. Thank you very much for that. So my question would be around digital transformation, specifically in healthcare. You spoke about universal healthcare. And maybe this was not part of the topic, but I'd like to know how is digital transformation being used in India to take care from responsive to preventive? Is there any initiative on that? And we need help with that.
Right, excellent question. So I'll just give a brief remarks on it because it's a very big subject, and I feel very passionate about the possibility of digital transformation in healthcare. One is that what's very encouraging is that the three areas where startups are getting maximum funding in India are enterprise solution, fintech, and healthcare. So, but it's even more encouraging that healthcare is overtaking fintech and enterprise software solutions. So I'll give you one example of how this works. You have a lot of migrant workers going in India, thousands, millions of people. So people have come up with solutions where cloud-based, data is kept. So they get their healthcare check done in, say, a state in the eastern part. And that data resides in the cloud, that is on their dumb phone also, that access. And when they are in some other place, they are able to reach a doctor, and the doctor is able to provide. Second, the government itself is essentially using telemedicine. So you have a system, by the way, we are doing telemedicine in all of Africa, also from India and Central Asia, using our own network that we established in Africa. So you have rural healthcare centers now connected to cities where hospitals are there. With broadband, they are even able to people go by mobile vans, do x-rays, transfer the data to the cities, they're analyzed, and the report is sent. So that's creating a completely new paradigm for healthcare access for people from rural areas, because they have to go all the way to big cities, sometimes wait for days in order to do it. Third, tokenization has been introduced, which means that if you need an appointment, you are in a village 1,000 kilometers away from Delhi, where you want to get the most advanced healthcare checkup done, or you can seek an appointment to get a token number, to get a date and time. You no longer have to wait endlessly to have an opportunity to see a doctor. So most of as we are getting into the insurance system, so 500 million people are to be covered by health insurance. So as part of this onboarding of people, their basic medical checkup is being done, and the data is being stored on cloud, on the servers, and it is accessible to doctors anywhere, and it is also accessible to the patients. So there are variety of ways in which this is taking place. But I think to me the biggest change has been the way we have been able to change maternal and child health by simply giving right advisories on phones and through the common service centers, where women are in rural areas getting health advisories, getting how to prenatal and postnatal care. And that's going to make a big difference to both infant mortality and maternal health. So you can keep thinking of ways in which this is happening. And by the way, there are so many private hospitals and private healthcare centers that are taking on this responsibility because they see this big market at the bottom of the pyramid. And one that doesn't have to be priced at the high end, but that is priced in a way that combined with healthcare insurance and so on. We will see a revolution in healthcare. To me, this was the biggest reform measure that the government had to be the most, I think, personally satisfied. Because the biggest source of impoverishment in rural areas, in developing economies, is poor health. If your child, every other consumption is discretionary, health is not. If you are, imagine what you can do for those of you who are at the enterprise and can find solutions. The people who have to sell land, sell whatever assets they have, sell their jewelry, take care of their parents, and it gets them into indebtedness which they could never get out of, because they live on a cycle of income that is just there enough. So these are the changes, and the best part is that our enterprises and startups are becoming part of this whole thing.
Any other questions?
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. That was very interesting. I was just very curious because one of the challenges that you mentioned was that of data sovereignty. I was curious what you meant about that and what exactly the challenges are around it.
So now everyone's in some way or the other connected to digital platforms, some digital application that they use. And therefore everyone is generating, I mean, people will tell you about the terabytes of data that is generated every second. Now when and you know that data mining has always been something that is of great value to companies. So if you are buying an air ticket for Bali, you get all the hotels, and you get car rentals and everything on. So all this that's a revenue model for a large number of big companies. Now imagine a future where internet is ubiquitous, everyone is on it. Every second we are generating data, every time we take our phone and pass it on. And then when you're entering a future where artificial intelligence is going to be the currency of power and global standing and economic competitiveness, it depends both on technology and data. There is no artificial intelligence, no matter how good your chips are, if you do not have enough data to work with, to create that predictability in the system, that response mechanism. So countries are suddenly beginning to see that there is great value in data, and that data is flowing across as a common good, as a public good, currently. It's like, so suddenly there is now an expectation in every country, and I can tell you about India too, that wait a minute, we need to use this data for ourselves. And if all this data is being siphoned out outside, there are others who are benefiting from it. We are not getting any revenue for it. There is a security dimension to it because you can profile just about anyone. And third, that we may be left behind on the artificial intelligence curve. So the moment data becomes a valuable resource like once coal was, or once minerals were, people are going to want to use this as something that enables them to benefit more than the others. So which means that at some point people are going to say, what are the arrangements through which data flows from country A to country B? And it's far more complex than it used to be in the era of goods. I mean, it was bad enough that in a global supply chain, rules of origin is the most difficult thing to decide in a free trade agreement. But it is going to be even more difficult if you are going to try and segregate data. But that's going to happen. First, we have, for example, now a data protection bill that talks of data residency in India and that talks of processing of data in India. So if you are a, let's say, payments company, or you're a banking company and you are doing data processing in India, you normally have a center somewhere outside where you integrate all data processing. You should be able to do it, you have to create new centers. and you may not be able to integrate everything into a common picture. That's going to be a difficult part. People have to think these things. But our data protection bill, as any others, has a provision that governments can enter into agreements with other governments to create trusted data governance. And you heard DPA and HDPN recently speak about data FTAs. He said that on a few occasions. For all enterprises, you need to pay attention to this space of what is going to happen with governments and at the United Nations and in multilateral data. Because if we have domestic players in India and in China and in the United States and in other countries who will say that, look, I need that advantage because my system is generating data. And if others are going to be using it and I'm not benefiting from it, that's not fair. So you will see that same pressures that come in the products market, you will see that coming also in the data market. We are at the beginning of this debate, and we are hopefully going to see more conversations around the world on this. But it's something that needs to be studied in detail. So when we speak of sovereignty, it is about data generated in the mind, like territorial sovereignty, sovereignty over mineral resources, sovereignty over my water, sovereignty over my forest, some of my fisheries. So in international law, under UNCLOS, 12 nautical miles from your coastline is your exclusive economic zone. You have the fishing rights even as you own the sea. But look, what I'm getting at, it came about as a result of a whole body of international law. So we will have to, and all of, and whenever I meet somebody from any enterprise or IT, I ask this question, have you thought about this? Can you give me some answers? Can you give me some way of thinking about this? So see, Singapore and for example, Australia have entered into an agreement already to share data because their systems need it. But it is not, it's still consent driven. And that's, I think, where some kind of a model.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for sharing the very inspiring developments in India from a digital and technological perspective. I participated in Singapore for these 3 years.
Yes.
I'm sure you have spoken to many business leaders, etc. I was wondering if you could help share with us what you believe the biggest challenge and the best opportunity facing Singapore now at this juncture of the industrial digital revolution. Thank you.
I think the recipe for success that is where we'll continue to hold back, which is that Singapore has done what it takes to succeed, which is to invest in human resources. It today has some of the best universities, best schools, best vocational training centers in the world in a very short span of time. It's a remarkable achievement in openness, which is recognizing that as a small country, it needs to leverage the entire world to add value. So I think it just sees the rest of the world as an extension of the Little Red Book and has built its policies around its openness. Third, of course, is the infrastructure, which is always staying ahead of its time. And it is something which will continue to be a source of attraction. I mean, most global companies that go to it, that work in India, do it through Singapore. And it's because it has the infrastructure and a business environment and ease of living, so not just ease of doing business, that enables people from all over the world to come to live and work. And so, fourth and very important is the invisible and the intangible, which is the society is a deeply multi-racial, harmonious, multicultural society that isn't just trying to practice tolerance, but is embracing its diversity and progress. It's a very important strength that economists may not always speak of. But the foundations of success lie on a society that is peaceful, harmonious, integrated, where everyone feels that she or he has the opportunity to succeed and to contribute and to achieve on the strength of her merits. What is it that is going, of course, it's going to face a lot of global challenges. We are all navigating through very turbulent waters of international relations. It's part of a global supply chain, and it runs the risk of disruption. I don't think we can take the technology and trade disputes too lightly, because you can resolve issues of tariffs, you can resolve issues of deficit to some extent, but much harder to resolve issues of competitiveness and strategic interests. And technology has always been at the root of strategic domination, competition, and success. So in a world which had begun to believe that, at least as far as the technology world is concerned, we're one big family, is now suddenly facing the denial regimes again. And technology denial regimes has become a very complex affair. And it isn't just one country, it starts affecting every other country that may be a part of it. And I can speak at length about the US export control regulations. I've spent a lot of time dealing with it from in the manner in which it can affect the access to technology for some countries. But that disruption is going to affect you. We've already seen the PMI contract in the last quarter, and for the first time in 2.5 years. So that's the challenge we will have to do. Now the only way to do it, really, is to diversify. Because we can get either totally obsessed with this competition and say, and keep focusing on it, or we say we build resilience into the system and navigate ourselves out into other markets as well. And you certainly will see Southeast Asia, India, and Africa, and to an extent Latin America, emerging as new priorities also for. See, the other area I'd like to say where Singapore needs to do now to go up to the next value chain is in the realm of innovation. I feel, my sense is that Singapore's success is to a large extent to be efficiency, doing everything better than what others do, and applying the best what you can see in the world here. And innovation has been incremental. Singapore now needs to be the home of transformative innovation, of research and development that produces new Nobel laureates, that produces IPR which are completely new and brings in an entirely new market or an entirely new industry, not just expand an existing industry. And I think that transition has to be made. Because we are at the takeoff stage, you have the universities and the wherewithal to do that. It is now time to think not in terms of rate of return on the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, but think of rate of return in 10 years, 15 years. Look at what National Science Foundation did for the United States. It was an open sky research program supported by the government. Today, most of the benefits that you see in some way are linked to this, the funding that was National Science Foundation. It was never thought of as what is going to be the rate of return of this, but how great this idea could be. They looked at people and this group, this team is capable of doing something that human beings don't know. And that is where we have to get to even here in Singapore. And I hope that these two things will diversify for the short term, think of transformative technologies and innovation.